The woman everyone calls invisible is usually the one who remembers every detail they were too busy to see. The crystal chandeliers above the Whitmore Holdings ballroom cast soft, gold reflections across polished marble floors while waiters moved silently between clusters of executives in dark suits and elegant dresses, laughter drifting beneath the low jazz music like it belonged to another world entirely. But Claire Bennett stood near the back wall beside the catering station with a clipboard pressed against her chest and felt exactly where she always felt in this building, unseen. Her dark cardigan was 2 seasons old, the sleeves slightly stretched at the wrists, her blonde hair twisted into the same practical bun she wore every day, thin glasses resting low on her nose while she checked guest badges one last time. "Office ghost is working overtime again," someone whispered nearby. A few people laughed softly. Claire pretended not to hear. She always did. At the center of the room stood Adrian Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings, 38, polished, confident, the kind of man magazines called visionary and employees called intimidating when he was not around. He listened to investors with easy charm while his assistant handed him a personnel report tablet between conversations. Adrian skimmed names without interest until his eyes paused. Claire Bennett. Operations support. 7 years. No promotion requests. No social participation. Performance rating, exceptional. He looked up automatically and spotted her across the room organizing table assignments by herself. His expression barely changed. Reliable, he said absent-mindedly to the executive beside him. But invisible. His eyes lingered 1 second longer. Honestly, she looks painfully boring. The executive chuckled. Adrian had already moved on. Claire had not. Because she heard every word. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard until the edges pressed into her skin. For 1 small second the room blurred under the warm lights. Not ugly. Not boring. Invisible. Somehow that hurt more. She lowered her eyes before anyone could notice and quietly stepped away through the side hallway leading toward the empty conference wing. The sounds of music faded behind her. Inside a dark meeting room overlooking downtown Chicago, she placed her bag on the table and slowly pulled out a worn blue notebook. The cover corners were bent from years of use. She opened to a blank page and wrote carefully beneath the date. "One day I'll stop being invisible." She stared at the sentence for several seconds, then turned the page. Hidden behind meeting notes and schedules were pencil sketches, building facades, office layouts, people sitting by windows, and one unfinished drawing of Whitmore Holdings itself under snowfall. Claire closed the notebook immediately as footsteps echoed somewhere down the hall. She slipped it back into her bag, straightened her glasses, and returned to the ballroom with the same quiet expression everyone expected from her, never noticing that from across the room Adrian Whitmore looked up once more, and this time, for reasons he could not explain, his eyes followed her. The next morning Chicago woke beneath a pale gray sky while the wind pushed cold air between the glass towers downtown, and Claire Bennett was already at her desk on the 23rd floor of Whitmore Holdings at 6:45 in the morning, nearly 90 minutes before most employees arrived. The office lights above operations had not fully turned on yet. Only the glow from her monitor and the city skyline outside kept the room from feeling empty. She placed her worn canvas bag beside the desk and carefully slid the blue notebook into the top drawer before anyone could see it. Then she opened 3 spreadsheets at once and began fixing scheduling conflicts left unfinished from the previous night. Her fingers moved quickly. Quietly. Efficiently. The way they always did. Nobody noticed that every department on this floor ran smoother because Claire was already there before sunrise. Nobody knew she had rewritten inventory systems after hours. Nobody asked who corrected executive presentation errors before board meetings. They only knew she was dependable. Invisible people usually were. At 8:15 her phone vibrated softly. "Mom." Claire answered immediately. "Good morning." Her voice softened. The woman on the other end sounded tired but warm. "Did you eat breakfast?" Claire smiled despite herself. "I will." It was not true. "Your appointment is Friday," her mother reminded gently. Claire looked down at the budget sheet hidden beneath her keyboard. Numbers circled in red. Medication costs. Physical therapy. Rent. Utilities. She quietly closed the page. I know. Everything is covered. Another small lie. After the call ended, she opened her drawer for a moment. Inside, the blue notebook rested beside folded invoices and a pencil sketch of a small brick house with flower boxes beneath the windows. Home someday, she had written under it months ago. Footsteps approached. Claire closed the drawer immediately. Across the building on the executive floor, Adrian Whitmore stood inside the boardroom staring at a failed projection report. A $40 million expansion initiative had stalled for the third week in a row. Delays. Missing coordination. Rising costs. Around the table, executives defended themselves while Adrian remained silent. He hated excuses more than mistakes. Nobody sees the whole system, he finally said. Everybody protects their own department. The room went quiet. Later that afternoon, Claire sat alone in the break room finishing a $5 salad from the grocery store downstairs while reviewing process maps inside her notebook. She paused, drew several arrows, crossed out 3 departments, and rewrote the entire workflow in pencil. Her eyes sharpened behind her glasses. This could work, she thought. She tore out the page carefully and folded it into her bag before anyone entered. Down the hall, the elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped out unexpectedly. Their eyes met for half a second. Claire looked away first. Adrian kept walking. But this time he remembered her name. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows that night, while most of Whitmore Holdings had already gone dark. But lights still glowed inside the executive floor where tension had settled over the building like a storm no one could stop. The expansion project was falling apart faster now. Vendor timelines no longer matched. 3 departments blamed each other. Financial forecasts changed by the hour. Inside his office, Adrian Whitmore loosened his tie and stared at another failed report spread across his desk. Every solution brought more problems. Every meeting ended the same way. He rubbed his forehead and looked toward the city below. Somewhere beneath the glass towers, Chicago moved on without caring whether his company succeeded or collapsed. Downstairs on the operations floor, Claire Bennett sat alone beneath the hum of fluorescent lights with her blue notebook open beside a half-empty paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She had stayed 3 extra hours after everyone left. Spread across her desk were printed schedules, inventory chains, staffing overlaps, and delivery timelines. Her pencil moved quickly. Cross out 1 route. Merge 2 teams. Shift approval sequence. Eliminate duplicated reporting. Suddenly the entire system breathed again. Claire leaned back slowly. Her heart beat faster. This could save the project. She looked around the empty office as if someone might appear and tell her she had no right to think that. Nobody came. She tore out the pages carefully. At the top she wrote only 2 letters. CB. Then she slipped the document into an internal executive submission envelope and walked toward the secure drop box outside the leadership floor. 5 minutes later she was gone. The next morning Adrian entered the boardroom expecting another disaster. Instead, a thick folder sat in front of him. No sender. No explanation. Only a handwritten note. You are solving departments. The problem is the system. He opened the report. Silence filled the room. 1 page became 3. 3 became 10. His expression changed almost immediately. Reorganized workflow. Cost recovery projections. Staff redistribution. Hidden bottlenecks identified months ahead. Someone had seen everything. Around the table, executives exchanged confused looks. Adrian flipped to the final page. Initials only. CB. He stood without saying a word and walked to the window. Who wrote this? Nobody answered. Find out. Meanwhile, Claire sat downstairs updating invoices while the entire office buzzed with rumors. Someone had impressed the executive floor. Someone had saved the expansion project. Someone important was finally being noticed. Claire lowered her eyes and continued typing. Her drawer remained slightly open. Inside, the blue notebook rested beside a folded sketch of Whitmore Holdings under winter snow. Near noon, an email notification appeared on every screen in the company. Emergency leadership review. Mandatory attendance. Claire looked up slowly. Across the office, people whispered nervously. On the executive floor, Adrian Whitmore still held the anonymous report in his hands. For the first time in weeks, he was not thinking about failure. He was thinking about two small handwritten letters that somehow felt familiar. The emergency leadership review stretched late into the evening, and by the time employees finally began leaving Whitmore Holdings, rain was falling hard across downtown Chicago, turning the city lights outside into blurred ribbons of gold and white against the glass. Claire Bennett stayed behind again. She always did. The operations floor had gone quiet except for the low hum of computers entering sleep mode one by one. She gathered folders into neat stacks, slipped her blue notebook into her bag, and headed toward the elevators with tired shoulders and a mind still replaying the company email from earlier. Nobody had announced who wrote the recovery proposal. Nobody had been recognized. Part of her felt relieved. Another part felt strangely disappointed. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Claire stepped inside and pressed the lobby button. Just before the doors closed, a hand appeared between them. Adrian Whitmore entered. Claire froze immediately. The elevator began descending in silence. 28 floors felt much longer when there were only two people inside. Adrian loosened his tie slightly, rain still visible on the shoulders of his dark coat. He looked tired. Not polished magazine tired. Real tired. The kind that sat behind the eyes. Claire kept her gaze lowered toward the floor numbers. 30. 29. 28. Then suddenly the elevator stopped. The lights flickered once. Silence. Claire looked up. Adrian pressed the emergency panel. Nothing happened. Perfect, he muttered under his breath. The backup lights came on, casting the elevator in soft amber. Outside, thunder rolled faintly through the building. Claire shifted awkwardly. It usually resets in a few minutes, she said quietly. Adrian glanced toward her, almost surprised she had spoken. You know that from experience? She nodded once. Late nights. The answer lingered in the small space between them. Adrian leaned back against the wall. For the first time, he really looked at her. Not the employee file. Not the woman across the ballroom. Just Claire. She looked exhausted. There were faint pencil marks on her fingers. A strand of blonde hair had slipped loose from her bun. Her canvas bag rested against her feet. A corner of paper stuck out from the zipper. Sketch paper. The elevator jolted lightly. Claire instinctively reached for the bag. Too late. A folded page slipped out and drifted to the floor. Adrian bent first and picked it up. It was a pencil drawing of Whitmore Holdings beneath snowfall. Every window shaded carefully. Tiny figures walking below. Warm light glowing from the lobby entrance. It felt alive. Claire stood still. I am sorry, Adrian said quietly, handing it back. I did not mean to look. She took the page quickly and slid it into the bag. It is nothing. But Adrian was still staring. Because in the lower corner were two small initials written in pencil. CB. His eyes lifted slowly toward her. At that exact moment, the elevator lights returned. The doors opened. Claire stepped out first without looking back. Adrian remained inside 1 second longer, standing perfectly still while two familiar letters echoed in his mind again. For the next 3 days, Adrian Whitmore could not stop noticing things he had somehow missed for 7 years. Claire Bennett arrived before almost everyone. She left after most lights were already off. People came to her desk constantly with problems they could not solve themselves. Password issues. Scheduling conflicts. Vendor confusion. Missing reports. Claire handled every interruption with the same quiet patience before returning to her own workload without asking for recognition. Adrian watched from conference room windows and hallway corners more than once, though he would have denied it if anyone asked. On Thursday morning he stood beside the glass wall outside operations while executives argued behind him about recovery projections. Inside the office Claire was focused on 3 monitors at once, one hand absent-mindedly touching the blue notebook beside her keyboard while she reviewed logistics data. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. CB. He entered the room without warning. Conversation stopped almost immediately. Employees straightened in their chairs. Claire looked up slowly, surprised. Adrian walked directly toward her desk. Miss Bennett. Her fingers tightened around the notebook edge. Yes, sir? Come with me. The entire floor fell silent as Claire followed him toward the executive conference room. She could feel eyes burning into her back the entire walk. Inside the room, Adrian placed the anonymous proposal onto the table between them. Claire stopped breathing for one terrible second. Did you write this? He asked quietly. There was no anger in his voice. Somehow that made it worse. Claire looked down at the pages. The familiar pencil annotations. The system redesign. The signatures. She considered lying. But she was tired of pretending her mind did not exist. Yes, she answered softly. Adrian stared at her. Why stay anonymous? Claire gave a small, uncomfortable shrug. Because nobody was asking someone like me for solutions. The words landed harder than she intended. Adrian leaned back slightly. He remembered the ballroom. Invisible. Boring. A strange feeling moved through his chest now. Not guilt exactly. Something sharper. What did you learn to do this? Claire hesitated. Graduate business program at Northwestern. Adrian blinked once. You have an MBA? Almost. Her eyes lowered. I left before finishing. Why? Claire folded her hands together carefully. My mother got sick. Silence filled the room. Through the glass walls, downtown Chicago shimmered beneath pale winter sunlight, while somewhere far below horns echoed through traffic. Adrian looked at the woman sitting across from him as if seeing her for the first time. Not the quiet employee everyone ignored. Not the awkward woman from the party. Someone disciplined. Intelligent. Creative. Someone who carried entire systems silently while nobody looked twice. His gaze drifted toward the blue notebook in her arms. And the drawings? Claire immediately stiffened. They are private. Adrian nodded once. Fair enough. But curiosity had already rooted itself too deeply now. That evening, after most employees left, Adrian remained in his office reviewing the proposal again when his assistant entered carrying archived vendor files. A folded document slipped loose onto his desk accidentally. He barely glanced at it before freezing. It was a freelance design invoice connected to Whitmore Holdings renovation sketches from months earlier. Artist name, C. Bennett Studio. Adrian slowly leaned back in his chair while rain began tapping softly against the windows again. Then, for the first time in years, Adrian Whitmore smiled at work for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with business. Monday morning arrived with the sharp energy of a city trying to outrun winter while sunlight spilled across the mirrored towers downtown, and for the first time in 7 years Claire Bennett walked into Whitmore Holdings knowing people were going to look at her differently. The anonymous proposal was no longer anonymous. Word had spread through every department over the weekend. Executives who had never spoken to her before suddenly greeted her in elevators. Managers asked for her opinion during meetings. Even the receptionist downstairs smiled too brightly when Claire entered the lobby carrying her canvas bag and blue notebook against her chest. The attention felt unnatural, like wearing someone else's coat. At 9 sharp, Adrian Whitmore entered the main conference room where department leaders waited around a polished walnut table. Claire sat near the end quietly organizing notes, while avoiding eye contact with everyone. Adrian noticed immediately. He noticed everything about her lately. The way she tucked loose hair behind her ear when nervous. The way she pressed her thumb against notebook corners while thinking. The way she never interrupted people even when she was clearly the smartest person in the room. Miss Bennett will lead operational recovery on the expansion project moving forward, Adrian announced calmly. Half the room froze. Claire looked up in shock. One executive nearly dropped his pen. Another exchanged a skeptical glance with the vice president beside him. Adrian ignored all of it. Her strategy prevented losses that would have cost this company millions. From now on, her recommendations go directly through my office. Silence spread across the room before reluctant nods followed. Claire's heartbeat pounded so loudly she barely heard the rest of the meeting. Afterward, people surrounded her immediately with questions, forced smiles, and sudden professional respect that had never existed before. Claire escaped as quickly as possible and hurried toward the quieter hallway near architectural planning. She exhaled deeply once she was finally alone. You look terrified. Adrian's voice behind her nearly made her jump. She turned quickly. He stood holding 2 coffee cups. I was not expecting any of this, she admitted softly. Adrian handed her 1 cup. Most people spend their lives waiting to be noticed. Claire looked down at the coffee. Sometimes being invisible feels safer. Adrian studied her face carefully. There was honesty there. Not ambition. Not manipulation. Just someone who had learned to survive quietly. You should stop hiding, he said before he could stop himself. Claire gave a small, uncertain laugh. You make it sound easy. Adrian almost told her he had been wrong about her from the beginning. Almost. Instead, he noticed pencil marks on her fingertips again. Were you drawing this morning? Claire immediately looked embarrassed. Only during lunch breaks. Adrian leaned lightly against the hallway window. I looked up C. Bennett's studio. Her eyes widened. You did what? The renovation sketches from last year. They were yours. Claire stared at him silently. Outside, snowflakes had begun drifting slowly past the glass. Why keep that hidden too? Adrian asked quietly. Claire hesitated before answering. Because people only notice beautiful things after someone important tells them they should. The words landed directly in his chest. Adrian looked at her differently then. Not with curiosity anymore. Not even admiration. Something deeper. More dangerous. And for the first time in years, Adrian Whitmore realized he was looking forward to seeing someone at work more than he looked forward to closing a deal. By the following week, Claire Bennett no longer walked through Whitmore Holdings unnoticed. Conversations lowered when she entered rooms. Executives suddenly copied her on emails they used to ignore. Her recovery strategy had already stabilized the expansion project, and Adrian Whitmore made sure everyone knew it during every leadership update. But admiration inside corporate buildings could turn poisonous faster than winter wind in Chicago. Especially when success arrived too suddenly. Claire felt it changing around her little by little. The smiles became sharper. Compliments sounded rehearsed. People who once ignored her now studied her clothes, her hair, her every interaction with Adrian as if searching for hidden answers. That Friday evening, Whitmore Holdings hosted a private investor reception on the top floor. Claire almost declined the invitation twice before finally standing in front of her apartment mirror holding a simple navy blue dress she had not worn in years. Nothing glamorous. Nothing dramatic. But when she let her hair fall naturally around her shoulders and removed the heavy office cardigan she always hid behind, even she barely recognized herself for a moment. Across town, Adrian adjusted his cufflinks inside the penthouse elevator, while his assistant reviewed investor schedules beside him. Attendance numbers are excellent, she said. Adrian barely listened. Did Claire confirm? His assistant smiled faintly. You mean Miss Bennett? Adrian looked away toward the city lights below. Yes. By the time Claire entered the ballroom, soft piano music drifted through the air beneath glowing chandeliers while conversations paused almost invisibly around her. Not because she looked like a different woman. Because people were finally looking closely enough to see the woman who had been there all along. Adrian saw her immediately from across the room. His chest tightened before he could explain why. Claire stood near the entrance, uncertainly smoothing one sleeve while strands of blonde hair framed her face softly under the warm lights. For one dangerous second, Adrian forgot every conversation around him. Then he walked directly toward her. You came, he said quietly once he reached her. Claire smiled nervously. I work here, It would have looked strange if I disappeared. Adrian almost laughed. You do not disappear anymore. The words lingered between them longer than either expected. Nearby, two senior managers watched carefully from the bar. One leaned toward the other with a smirk. Funny how fast invisible employees get promoted after spending time alone with the CEO. The other chuckled quietly. Claire heard every word. Adrian did too. His expression hardened immediately. Claire looked down first. The warmth from earlier vanished from her face almost instantly. Throughout the rest of the evening, whispers followed her through the ballroom like shadows. She caught fragments everywhere. Pretty convenient. No wonder she got access. Maybe Adrian likes quiet girls. Claire stood alone near the balcony doors, gripping a champagne glass she had barely touched while snow drifted softly outside beyond the skyline. Adrian approached carefully. Ignore them, he said. Claire gave a hollow smile. Easy for you to say. Adrian opened his mouth to defend her publicly right then. To stop the rumors. To tell everyone they were wrong about her. But hesitation won the battle he hated himself for losing. Because deep down he understood exactly how corporate gossip spread. One wrong move could destroy her credibility completely. His silence lasted only seconds. But to Claire Bennett, it felt like confirmation. Claire Bennett resigned the following Monday at exactly 8:12 in the morning. No dramatic speech. No tears. Just a single envelope placed quietly on the human resources desk before most employees even arrived. By noon, the entire building knew. Rumors spread through Whitmore Holdings faster than facts ever did. Some claimed she accepted another executive offer. Others whispered Adrian had ended whatever secret relationship they imagined existed. Nobody understood the truth because nobody had ever really listened to Claire Bennett in the first place. Adrian found the resignation letter waiting on his desk after a budget meeting. He read the first line twice before standing so suddenly his chair rolled backward into the glass wall behind him. Effective immediately. He called operations. No answer. He called security downstairs. Miss Bennett left the building 30 minutes ago. Adrian grabbed his coat without another word. Snow fell steadily across Chicago streets, while traffic crawled beneath pale afternoon light. Adrian drove himself for the first time in months, one hand gripping the steering wheel harder with every red light. By the time he reached Claire's apartment building, the sidewalks were nearly covered in white. The landlord downstairs shook his head before Adrian even finished asking. She moved out yesterday. Adrian stood frozen beneath the flickering hallway light. Did she leave a forwarding address? No. The older man paused. But she left this in the trash room. He handed Adrian a torn cardboard portfolio case. Inside were rejected gallery applications, unpaid medical invoices, and copies of Claire's architectural sketches folded carefully beneath everything else, as if they mattered least to her. Adrian stared silently at one drawing in particular. It showed a woman standing alone inside a crowded ballroom while everyone around her faced the opposite direction. In the corner, small pencil letters read, "The man who never saw me." Something inside Adrian cracked quietly then. 3 nights later, a private invitation arrived at Whitmore Holdings headquarters addressed personally to Adrian Whitmore. No sender. Only an address for a downtown art gallery opening. Adrian entered the gallery alone beneath soft amber lights and the faint sound of piano music echoing through white walls. Then he stopped breathing for a moment. Every painting surrounding him belonged to Claire. Chicago skylines reflected through rainy windows. Exhausted office workers beneath fluorescent lights. Empty elevators glowing gold at midnight. Invisible people standing in crowded rooms while nobody looked at them. And at the center of the gallery hung the ballroom sketch from the portfolio. Larger now. Finished. The title beneath it read, "The Man Who Never Saw Me." Adrian stepped closer slowly. Around him strangers admired the work, openly. "These are incredible," someone whispered nearby. "Whoever painted these really understands loneliness." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Because suddenly he understood too. Claire had never wanted power. Never wanted attention. She only wanted someone to truly see her. And when she finally stood in front of him without hiding, he failed her at the exact moment it mattered most. Then Adrian noticed something near the final exhibit. Resting inside a glass case beneath soft lighting sat a worn blue notebook. Her notebook. Open to a single page. One sentence written in careful pencil. "One day I will stop being invisible." Adrian stared at the words while snow drifted quietly outside the gallery windows, and for the first time in his life, the millionaire who once overlooked her realized there was absolutely nothing in the world he wanted more than one more chance to make Claire Bennett feel seen. 2 weeks after the gallery opening, employees arriving at Whitmore Holdings found something unexpected waiting in the main lobby. Every digital screen inside the building displayed the same announcement beneath soft gold lettering. "The Woman We Failed to See, a company exhibit honoring Claire Bennett." People stopped walking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Near the elevators stood enlarged reproductions of Claire's artwork alongside handwritten notes explaining how one overlooked employee had quietly saved a multimillion-dollar expansion project while carrying responsibilities nobody bothered to notice. At the center of the lobby, protected beneath glass and warm lighting, rested the worn blue notebook that had once sat forgotten beside Claire's keyboard every day. Adrian Whitmore stood alone near the exhibit before sunrise, hands in his coat pockets while snow drifted beyond the tall windows outside. For the first time in years, he did not care what shareholders thought. He did not care about board approval ratings or financial headlines. Because somewhere between the crowded ballroom, the late-night elevator, and the woman walking away from him, Adrian had finally learned the difference between looking at someone and truly seeing them. Employees slowly filled the lobby as morning began. Many looked uncomfortable reading the exhibit descriptions aloud. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Adrian let them feel it. Let them understand exactly what silence and judgment could cost another person. At 9:05 the lobby doors opened quietly. Claire Bennett stepped inside wearing a long cream-colored coat dusted with snowflakes, clearly intending to leave something with security before anyone noticed her. Then she froze. Her eyes lifted slowly toward the exhibit. Toward her artwork. Toward her notebook. Toward the massive display screen where her name glowed above the words "Invisible No More." The entire lobby fell silent. Adrian walked toward her carefully, stopping only a few feet away. Claire looked stunned. "What is this?" she whispered. Adrian's voice remained calm but unsteady beneath the surface. "A correction." Claire looked around at hundreds of eyes suddenly watching her openly after years of pretending she did not exist. "You did not have to do this." Adrian shook his head once. "Yes. I did." For a moment neither moved. Then Adrian reached into his coat pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. Claire recognized it instantly. The first page she ever wrote in the blue notebook. "One day I will stop being invisible." Adrian held it carefully like something priceless. "You already were extraordinary," he said quietly. "The failure was ours. Especially mine." Claire's eyes shimmered slightly beneath the lobby lights. Adrian took one slow breath before continuing. "I judged you before I knew you. I saw your clothes before your mind. Your silence before your strength. And when people tried to tear you down, I hesitated instead of standing beside you." His voice lowered further. "I will regret that for the rest of my life if you walk away now." Around them nobody dared speak. Snow continued falling softly beyond the windows while the city blurred white outside. Claire stared at him for several long seconds before finally asking the question that mattered most. "Why now?" Adrian smiled faintly, sadness and honesty mixing together for the first time. "Because somewhere along the way, the woman I once overlooked became the only person I could not stop thinking about." Silence. Then slowly, carefully, Claire stepped closer. Adrian reached into his pocket one last time and revealed a small velvet ring box. Gasps echoed quietly across the lobby. "I am not asking for perfection," he said softly. "Just another chance to see you the way I should have from the beginning." Claire looked down at the ring, then at the blue notebook beneath glass nearby, then back at Adrian Whitmore standing in front of her with more sincerity than pride left in his eyes. Finally, she smiled through quiet tears and answered in the gentlest voice imaginable. Then really see me this time. And beneath the warm lobby lights of the company where she once disappeared unnoticed every single day, Adrian Whitmore pulled Claire Bennett into his arms while an entire building watched the invisible woman become unforgettable.